Welcome to this episode of Unleashed. I had an opportunity to work with a very successful leader, leader who was entrepreneur, built his company from scratch, passionately shaped its future, and was now ready to take off. He brought in many experienced professionals. He brought in people with specific talents, capabilities, which actually will help the organization to probably expand in new dimensions as well as scale up rapidly. But he struggled to work with these new professionals, new leaders he's brought in. He struggled to let go his control. He struggled to accept their inputs. He was almost every time imposing his style of working, his approaches to things, and was not letting them to perform to their full potential. As I worked with him during his coaching journey, we worked on this aspect of his to trust, to let go, and allow the new professionals to do their jobs, focus on delivering their outcomes, and allow them the freedom to bring in their own approaches to things, their own styles of doing things, and be accountable for the outcomes. This transformation journey was not easy for this leader. He had his ups and downs, struggles, but during our period of working together, he successfully addressed many of his own tendencies, successfully addressed many of his own challenges, and began to accept, see the value of working with other professionals, see the value of what flavors they are bringing into the company, and truly worked on letting go. And in this process, obviously, he was able to divert his time back to working on the scaling up areas, the new areas he wanted to expand, where he began to have the trust that the running operations, as well as some of the specialized areas they were expanding to, are going to be managed by these professionals. As I profiled his journey and as I profiled the learnings from the journey, which are by themselves true inspirations to many of us, you could actually reflect and learn from his journey, and you can probably see many of the instances, something most of us might have gone through at some stage of our lives or some stages of our leadership journeys. But then there were larger issues coming up as I profiled him, and I started reflecting, saying, is this limited to only this leader? Or I think, is this a systemic issue that needs to have a wider discussions around it? So actually, if you see that different leaders, whether they're building their own companies or now leaders in some other companies playing senior management roles, have these challenges of letting go, trusting, and allowing new ways of working. But for scaling, there is no option but to let go and allow new talent, new environments to come up there. So some of the thematic issues emerging, saying what makes somebody who's so passionate about building its own organization, somebody who associates himself so closely with the company, to trust new people to come into the system, to trust new people to take over and run the operations, to trust new people, have relationships with the customers they have grown, to let go all these controls. What should be the preparation he should have? What kind of preparations any organization can do to leverage outside talent as it starts growing its company? To discuss this, I reached out to several leaders. I reached out to several experienced professionals to understand what their journeys were, what did they do specifically to let go. In this episode, I have the privilege of sharing insights and conversations I had with the founders of Infosys, Kris and Shibulal. There is no need to introduce them. I think they have built an organization which is world-class. They have built an organization from being just hands-on founders to scaling it up so rapidly. They have gone through several phases of building it up. In this particular episode, I will specifically share the parts of the discussions where they talk about building an institution, building strong processes, building a data-centric organization. In the upcoming episodes, the other aspects around building the right people, building with a vision, and building a long-term organization, I will share perspectives around those. So I also talked to a very interesting but fast-growing startup which is not only now doing rapid scale up, but it's acquired new companies. It's also had add to their portfolio of services, but also has brought in very seasoned professional to work with along with the founder. So I reached out to Shiv. Shiv is the CEO, founder of Exotel, and he shares also his perspectives for scaling up his company. Specifically, again, as I said in this episode, we'll limit it to institution building and processes and systems. So let's begin with my conversations with Kris Gopalakrishnan. So I think your early stages where I think it was a lot more you founders to later on you started bringing in more people from outside to work with you. And what kind of changes you brought in? How did you build trust? How did you let go? Let's say relationship with the customer must have been the first thing. And then as we progressed, probably you brought in more management people to run the business. And now you have let go to run the board because you think although you are significant holders over a period of time, you let go the control over the board also and you're letting it build a long-term institution. So what lessons, insights we can learn from your journey? That's the kind of a discussion I wanted to have.
First of all, understanding that building scale requires an organizational structure that can handle the scale, right? So there is no choice but to bring people at different levels, people from outside to the organization. And from selection, getting involved in the selection, to training. And probably the most important piece is building systems and processes. See, trust comes from knowing from data what is happening in the company. And if you look at what Infosys has done very well is build a lot of systems and processes which allows people to work independently, but the status to be transparent to senior management, to leadership. There is also signals or early warning signals which says, okay, things are going well or not going well. So you can intervene on an exception basis. So the key is having those systems and processes in place, a review mechanism in place that allows you to give control to other people, but make sure that, one, you can intervene if needed, you can help them if needed, you can support them. And at the last stage, it's probably replace the person.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the first step. Well, it starts from recruitment.
Correct.
And we were all involved in training people from very early on. If you look at the 80s, etc., we recruited, we trained the people and brought them in and held their hands, etc. Then we put in the 90s, it's more about building systems and processes, etc., for an organization that can scale. And that is the way you will actually, plan for scale.
There was a stage where you exponentially grew. I think there was a linear growth for some time, linear growth for some time. And I think
through the 90s, it was linear. And the late 90s, early 2000, till probably 2007, 8, till the financial crisis. It was an exponential growth, then it slowed down. It picked up steam, but now, because of the scale, it's probably linear.
So how did this practice? I think therefore there was a little more hands-on, as you said, when people were coming in initially. Then systems and processes were stabilized for certain size of growth, certain this thing, and then the exponential happened. Was there any gear shift? How you build a different kind of an institution to have that exponential growth? At that stage, a lot more people came suddenly into the system.
No, it's creating the cascade of reviews. See, reviews are a good way to train people also. What to look for, what not to look for, which metrics are important. And for different roles, different metrics are important, right?
Correct.
For project managers, it's budgets, it's on-time delivery, it's defects, etc. For a salesperson, so you need to look at input metrics and output metrics.
Got it. Effort versus output also, both are looking at.
Both, ultimately output has to happen, but you also need to look at effort to make sure that yes, the person is doing the right things and moving in the right direction. So for a salesperson, you need to look at are they making calls? Is there a funnel? Are there being enough proposals being made? What is the win ratio in proposals? Who are your competitors and what are their advantages versus yours? How do we change the product in order to meet the competition better? How to be competitive in the market, and so relevancy of your services. Win ratio, those are the things that you look in the sales, this thing. In the HR function, you look at attracting enough number of people, retaining enough number of people, etc. Are reviews happening, employee satisfaction surveys. So, and telling people the relevance of these things and establishing these and institutionalizing this, the review mechanism is the way you train people and enable them so that they can then look at it on an ongoing basis.
To grow an organization, we need people. When we bring in people, I think we need to manage the organization through systems. We need to have measurements in place to understand if the right efforts are being put. We need to have measurements in place to see if the outcomes are being delivered. This is a learning process, but it is governed through processes and systems. And as Kris alluded, when they rapidly scaled up, the only way to probably scale up was to create a cascading system of governance and reviews. And the reviews were not only for managing the outcomes of the organization. I think the systems trains people and trains them into leaders. When you understand the thinking behind the reviews, the thinking behind the governance, the thinking behind the management aspects of the business, I think that will help people to build their personalities and leadership capabilities to effectively be ready to manage more scaled up businesses. Obviously, Infosys is a kind of company which is very large, very mature, and perhaps one of the best of its kind in the world in terms of growing and managing business. How about smaller companies? How about companies which are in early stages? How about companies which are very much dominated by the founders, the initial entrepreneurs? Will they be able to build such systems and manage through such institutional way of doing things? Or do they have a different approach to these things? Many times when I talk to smaller organizations, they say that they are not ready to run in an institutional way. They have their personal styles of working. To reflect on this, I reached out to Exotel. Exotel is in its early stages, now rapidly growing, having acquired a couple of companies, having brought in very seasoned professionals, also having got its series of fundings to really scale up the business and now rapidly growing, capturing the market in different aspects. Is it also now still being run in a personalized way, or they have brought in institutional way of running? So here my talks with Shiv. I start in the beginning getting from Shiv some inputs about what's the stage at which Exotel is, what kind of acceleration is happening in the business. And then we shift to how he's managing this rapid scale up with all the new people coming in, with all the new acquisitions happening. I wanted to just get a little overview from your start of Exotel to where you are today, the journey. And so many changes have happened in the last few years. So just where it is.
Originally, Exotel was a tool that I built for myself, actually. I was trying to build a classifieds business, which would have evolved into something like OLX of today. And so I wanted a medium for SMS and voice and things like that. And so it's really just a tool. Now, once I built it, many of my friends would also turn up and say, hey, can I use this for my company? And then I had started having paying customers and so on and so. So that's really how the journey on Exotel started. What I wanted to build was a cloud contact center for emerging Asia. So we pivoted a little bit. So the first pivot was that we stopped focusing on the cloud contact center and started focusing on the platform, the API platform. And that coincided with the emergence of the marketplace like business models in the startup world. And so that's how we ended up now powering specifically for voice calls, practically all the startups. So any last mile conversation that happens, passengers and drivers, teachers and students, doctors and patients, all of those calls, A, happened on the cloud and B, started happening through our system. So that was a big market that we discovered. And that was the first big win. Then just before COVID, we were engaging with BFSI, traditional consumer durables companies. They were beginning to adopt, but I think COVID put that on nitro boost. And so that was really the interest that catch the eye of all the investors. That gave me the ability to then start building what we used to call as full stack customer engagement platform. I basically went back to my old idea of building a cloud contact center. So we bought a company called Amio. Then we made Amio sit on top of the Exotel cloud. Then we bought a company called Cogno. So that was supposed to provide the AI aspects of it. And so now we have, and then we also got the MVNO license, which is a telco license. And then slowly we started focusing more and more on BFSI, traditional consumer durables, and not just the startups. So that was the phase 2. And then the last phase now that we've just started coincides with the emergence of generative AI. So those are the 3 phases that I'm able to identify that has happened.
And the speed has been absolutely rapid in the last few years.
That's right. We actually took advantage of the fact that we were at the right place at the right time. And so we ended up raising correctly. We ended up making a few bets. And so far, I think it's all played out very well. I'm just looking backward. I'm just happy that we didn't make any wrong moves, at least so far.
So what are the challenges you went through, the different phases, and how is it spanning out now with so many new people coming in and so many different perspectives coming in there? How are you each other not coming in either way, and at least enabling each other, and where are the frictions happening?
So usually friction happens in areas that are not fully aligned. By that, I'll give you an example. There are different parts of the P&L that I now take and distribute to different people. So there are some solutions which will actually now maximize top line but minimize margin. Some that maximize margin but might not actually get you the top line. And then there's an AOP and everybody is basically committed to the AOP.
Yeah.
And most of the conflicts actually happen here. To give you an example, should we now pick up a low margin business or not? Now, if you pick up the low margin business, it's a large customer, so you will substantially cross the AOP numbers in terms of your order book. But we have a certain gross margin target, and this might actually maybe even erode the gross margin. So these are the places where I think most of the conflicts end up happening. And I don't claim to actually have a complete solution. And I don't even know if there's actually a complete solution possible for these things. Sometimes you'll have to just let it play out. Usually people say a little bit of conflict is good. But right now, what I am trying to do is to see if we can align more and more people on a fewer dimensions rather than having too many dimensions play out at the same time. For example, what if you now say the prices are fixed? We won't change it for the next quarter. And then everybody is then just focused on just as an example to the question that you asked, illustration that everybody is just focused on bringing in the top line.
Correct.
So those are some of the ways in which I'm thinking about conflict resolution specifically. Recently, I used to, and most of us are from the KRA KPI world or MBO world. I think I think it feels like it's lived through its time. And the whole world is kind of moving through to the OKR world. And so have we. And I think I have personally seen that sort of a mindset actually clarifies a lot of things. And more importantly, it actually takes us back to the startup mindset that we used to have. So what it really does is it de-emphasizes a lot on roles and responsibilities and emphasizes a lot on objectives. And I tend to de-emphasize conversations about you own this, I own this, or you're responsible for this, I'm responsible for this. And instead encourage a more cross-functional, collaborative sort of an approach, which is to say, look, this is your objective. You're supposed to get $100 million. Now, if it means you're going to go sell yourself, or if it means you're going to convince the sales team, actually, that's completely fine with all of us. So that promotes a cross-functional sort of thought process. So that's another thing that seems to be working for us. But other than that, so the last piece is, instead of now asking questions like who is responsible for this, we ask questions like whose objective this is. And then we ask that person to say that you are the person who has the final call.
So what you really see, you're institutionalizing a process in a learning of institutionalizing a process where I think this kind of trade-offs and all are managed very effectively. And there is a review mechanism that, whether they're sticking to those institutionalized ways of doing things, whether it's fixing a price or there is an escalation process of handling it. Even a company like Exotel, which is in its early stages of evolution, relies on institutionalized processes, institutionalized systems, although they are evolving continuously to manage its business. Like Shiv had alluded, they're using OKR, so that's their way of managing through objectives. Clearly, it's important for every kind of business at every stage of its evolution to rely on institutional processes. But I want to shift back to this larger question: how does one learn and drive a company through a system? So, like, the systems are there in place. We are doing structured reviews. What kind of learnings, what kind of insights that will come? How do you make it a data-centric organization? In my conversations, Shibu brings in these new dimensions of how to drive it through data. What I'm now discussing with you, gentlemen, is around how do we empower, let go as we grow and scale the organization? So from your experiences of Infosys growing, what can we learn? What can we, so that other companies also can learn from it? Are there any special incidents or something where you had to tighten up things or change, take different paths? Are there any lessons learned from that journey?
So actually, if you look at the origin, so I think one of the points which I would like to add to what Kris said is about data, because if you want to let go, you need to have matrices and you need to have all these processes, which means you need to have data which comes from the source.
Correct.
So one of the good examples in Infosys was the project budgeting system. If you remember right, it got implemented in the early 2000s. That was one way of letting go of the project execution from it was not from a point of view of quality, it was from a point of view of effort and costs perspective. Mm-hmm. Right? The IPM looks after the quality side of the project, whereas the PBS looks after the... So we had to let go of the effort side and the cost side of the project to scale. We couldn't do everything centrally, but to do that, you needed a system which will monitor both.
Yeah.
What is the effort which is being spent in what is the budgeted effort, what is the actual effort, what is the budgeted cost, what is the actual cost, right? And what is the many of the other ratios. So that is a good example to think of. The PBS was a way to letting go of these two aspects, and IPM was a way of letting go of the quality aspect, time, quality, and cost, right? Mm-hmm. So PBS was cost, IPM was time and quality.
And this also can then be extended to prepare, proposals, because now you have data on how you're performing.
Correct.
So this also allows you to prepare project proposals, sales proposals and things like that.
Purely on performance, we are able to extract it and then...
It started, see, after a while, it became the baseline, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So it becomes a cycle. You have the data on the effort and the effort, cost and quality, and that then drives your estimation. Your estimation drives the next project.
Yeah.
So it becomes, but the question which you are asking is why these systems allowed us to let go, many of the decisions, because otherwise, previously, I'm sure somebody will come to Kris's room and say, give me a software engineer training, or say, give me a software engineer, because it is a cost or an effort. And the only person who could approve that was Kris.
Yeah.
But you can't do that for 5,000 projects, which has been approved by various people, which means you need transparency, you need data, you need transparency, you need exception analysis, you need outlier analysis and all of those things. And that is what these systems enable. So that you can let go of most of it. Most of it is running fine.
Correct. Setting systems is one level, but living by the systems is another level. I think although the leader I worked with focused on building the systems, got some institutional processes in place, but he never trusted them. So I'm now going to play excerpts from the book where you can experience his challenges of using the systems. You were saying you can trust your people? Well, I don't agree with Pankaj's views. You remember Ravi? Yes, of course, your CTO. He agrees with my views too. You're going over Pankaj and speaking to Ravi? Sounds odd when you put it that way. I'm not confident with the new team. You see, they haven't proven themselves. My meetings with them end in arguments over the route to take. That doesn't leave me with much choice but to discuss with the old timers, who now report to the new heads of business. Well, yes, I take updates from them and pass on my ideas. It puts a strain on your business, not to speak of the old timers. You are simply pushing things under the carpet. It isn't the most straightforward way of handling things. You know that as well as I do. You need to work with the leadership team. You need to let them own the goals and projects and then allow them to deliver the outcomes they agree upon. That's easy for you to say. If they make decisions that we end up rolling later, we aren't just talking about returning to status quo, which is bad enough. We're talking about damage to the business and Primavera's name. As you can see from the reflections with the coach, it is very clear that the trust is central to allowing systems and people to work. The journey of trust and a journey of struggle for the leader I worked with. So I wanted to actually really reflect with Kris and Shibu again. Did they have any ups and downs during their journey? So it all looked like that, when the systems have been put, everything has been thought through and what kind of ups and downs, if any, they had during their journey. I worked with this gentleman whose incidents I'm now recording in the book. He had to go a lot of ups and downs. He did try to put some institutional changes. He did bring some people, but there was certain amount of trial and errors before he could stabilize. Were there any in this huge scaling up, institutionalizing, building trust in the time? Were there any trial and errors? Were there any lessons learned before it could get to that kind of stability?
Probably not much. The reason I believe is because we have been there, done that, no? See, this is coming from our own experience, and now I think that's the advantage we had. We have written code, we have handled projects, we have handled customers, we have implemented systems. Maybe I don't know whether there were that many missteps in doing these things. Plus, these are systems which we have also used a little bit of theory and things like that. We went through the software CMM model and things like that. And so we have used theory plus practice, our own experience. And these are systems that we built based on our own. I think that's why I think there is probably less misstep. I know I'll let Shibu react.
Yeah, so I just I want to take one step and make one more remark. From the IPM and all that came the training plans and things like that. So the RCA, from various failures we had or critical projects and high-risk projects, led to RCA root cause analysis, and from the root cause analysis we need to identify the need for skilling, and that used to that used to be an input for all our training programs, etc. See, from a systems and a process perspective, I think number one, I think we use these frameworks, CMM and ISO, and all. Then we took help from external parties to define them from our collective experience, rather than doing anything else, right? Even the CMM processes were not defined by the consultant; it was defined collectively by the organization. Along with the consultant, right? So these were not the theory and practice combined. Theory helped created the framework, but the practice created the the various steps and activities, and so it was not a hypothetical model. It was not a model built from experience from the people, including us, but more there are other people also involved. And the theory came from the CMM side. Second thing is, while there has not been any misstep, I'm sure we went through continuous improvement for a period of time, right? So it is possible that there is a misstep, but it got buried because of because of the philosophy of continuous improvement. If we had made it very rigid, then there would have been missteps, which would have been much more visible to us, right? Right, the way our systems ran, we were always improving them continuously. We were getting audited continuously. We had quarterly quality reviews going on. We had many other processes which were continuously correcting the system. So it is not. I'm sure there has been missteps, right?
But it's like it seems to have been, the approach has been institutional right from beginning.
Yeah. So there is a super process running over this.
Correct.
Right, which is actually like a correcting machine, because you have all the data, all these processes are running, but there is a process running above this, which is more oriented towards various interventions, which are audits and things like that, where the corrections are happening. So there is a continuous monitoring of the behavior of the system itself, which will allow you to make mistakes but get corrected them in the next step. So I'm sure that the first version of PBS versus the current version is so different. I'm sure that the first IPM which we built versus what we have today is quite different. I'm sure that the learning process which we had today was very different. These are not even missteps, because we have a continuous improvement philosophy. Number one, improvement happens. Number two, unless it's a complete blunder, it just gets buried into this.
So scaling up requires letting go. But a key foundation to letting go, as we heard from different people, is to build strong systems and processes. Kris and Shibu believed in the power of systems to scale, to empower, and to build competitive edge. They worked hands-on in building the institution, constantly leveraging the best across the world to add to their own personal experiences. This is a great learning for many entrepreneurs. Many of them, like the leader I work with, build organizations which are centered around them and do not leverage the power of institutional way of working. Very glad to see Shiv providing leadership through institutional approach to realize the full potential of his organization. The leader I worked with could unleash the potential of his organization only when he moved from his centric to the institutional way of working. These are the important takeaways from all these discussions I shared with Kris and Shibulal, with Shiv in this episode. This is the only way one can rapidly scale up from steady state, or at any point, this is the only way one can run an organization successfully, bring in new people, empower them, and whether it is in a steady state or when it is rapidly scaling up. In the next episode, we will reflect on how top management rely on systems and release time for growth and scaling. Thank you.